Hi there, I'm Pamela Hignite, and today we are making small figurative busts, like these two guys. We are going to be using my paper clay recipe that I created in grad school. It's a handmade air-dry paper clay. We are going to be using newspaper and masking tape for the armature and rocks for the base, so the piece is weighted so it sits nicely on a table. So let's get started. First, we're going to make the armature. An armature is the structure upon which a sculpture is built. There are two types of armature, indirect armature and direct armature. Indirect armature is removed from the sculpture. Direct armature stays inside. So the kind of armature we're making today is called direct armature. We're going to use newspaper and masking tape. So newspaper tears really easily with the grain. So if you rip the newspaper with the grain, usually it's from top to bottom, you'll get a nice clean tear and two even sheets. When you're making a piece that requires symmetry, that's really important. You also want to wad your paper up and unwad it. And you want to do this several times. This softens the paper fibers and makes them a lot more sculptable. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to form is the head. And I needed to get an idea about the size of the head in relationship to the rock that I'm going to use, which is going to be this one. So I'm going to have that as reference. And so I think this one entire piece of newspaper, which is the size of an open sheet, is going to work pretty well. So once I've got that, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tear the tape. So you want to prepare quite a few strips of tape so that you can just grab them and wrap. So I'm going to squeeze this paper ball as tight as I can get it. I'm going to wrap this masking tape around one way and then the other so that they crisscross each other. Pull it tight. Another piece of tape. And pull in the corners so that I get a rounded form. Then I'm going to compare it to the size of the rock. That's not too bad. I do think I want this to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to add another piece of newspaper. I'm going to kind of create a little nest with the newspaper. And I'm going to sit the form that I made down inside of it. And then I'm going to put the tape on the form, pull it across the added newspaper and back to the form again. I'm going to do it so that I crisscross that piece again. The brand of masking tape that I'm using is Scotch 2020. It's pretty sticky, which is something that you want. You want the tape to definitely stick to itself. If you buy the cheap 99-cent masking tape that you find at Dollar General, it's not going to work very well for this process. Okay, so I have wrapped this, and I've wrapped this pretty tight. I don't have a lot of squish factor here, okay? That's super important. You want to have a little bit of plasticity, but not much. If you throw this and hit somebody with it, you want it to kind of sting a little bit. So I'm going to wrap more tape around this since I've got this to the size that I want. So I'm going to pull it in and reinforce the form. So I'm pulling in the little pieces of newspaper that are sticking out. I want everything covered with tape. This adds strength to the piece, and when we start to add the paper clay, if you have any newspaper showing, then it is going to cause your paper clay not to stick very well. The paper clay sticks to the tape very, very well. But if it try to put it on the newspaper, on just newspaper, it tends to fall off. So there's the head form. The next form we're going to work on is the neck. So in order to make the neck, I've already wadded up the paper, and I'm going to squeeze the paper into a cylinder type shape. So got this thing going on. I'm going to smash it down into the palm of my hand like so, and start to wrap it with tape. I'm going to do the crisscross again, so I'm going to wrap it around this way like so, and then I'm going to turn the paper and go that way, pulling kind of tightly. Okay, so this is what the crisscross looks like around the piece. And I'm going to compare it to the size of the head to see if I need to do any kinds of adjustments. I do want the neck to be longer, like the figures in Modigliani's portraiture. They had really long, elegant necks. And so I'm going to take another piece of wadded up newspaper and wrap it. Like I did the first one. So I'm going to crisscross this. This piece of newspaper is not quite as big. So I'm going to build this a little at a time. Okay, so I'm going to attach these two pieces together. So I'm going to run a piece of masking tape lengthwise. Flip this over. And fold it. Then I'm going to wrap it this way, so that I have a piece going all the way, whoops, all the way around. Yes, the masking tape does like to stick to you. So you can see if this is going to be the kind of length that I want. And I can also put it on the rock to see if that works. And I do want the neck to be a little bit thicker. So I am going to start to wrap this crisscross around the neck. I'm going to wrap it where it's kind of jointed there. Pulling it tighter. Hitting the top and the middle and the bottom. And I'm pulling this in rather tightly because I don't want this piece to be really soft and floppy. It has to be pretty firm in order for the paper clay to stick to it when we come to that part of the process. Okay, and now that I've pulled this in tight, I can see how thin this kind of is, and in comparison to the head, I do want the neck to be a little bit wider. So I'm going to kind of take this piece of paper and form it so that I get this little squishy section that's about the length of the neck. And I'm going to wrap this really tightly, just with a couple of pieces of tape. So I can kind of get an idea whether or not that's going to be thick enough, and I think it will. If not, I can add another piece onto this side, and there's a little dip there. I will add a piece of newspaper there to fill that out. I'm just going to wad a little piece of newspaper together, put it there, and secure it with a little piece of tape temporarily. And I think that works out okay. So now I'm going to wrap this. Kind of going at an angle to try to wrap as much newspaper and cover it with tape as much as I can. This one piece of tape. Okay. So kind of looks like a brat. So at this point, I'm going to compare the head and the neck and see if it's pretty close to what I want. And I think that'll work okay. So I'm going to squish it so I can make the top and the bottom a little bit fatter. Okay, and then I'm going to attach the head to the neck. Now, before I do that, the way the head attaches to the neck, the jaw drops down. So I'm going to push down on one side of the neck to make it lower than the other so that I get that drop when I put the head on there. Okay, so in order to attach the head, I need to kind of flip it around and kind of figure out which way it needs to sit in order to make the most sense. And I think this works. So I'm going to wrap a piece of tape. I'm going to try to center the tape on top of the head. And I'm going to wrap it and push it down kind of like rabbit ears down onto the neck. So that's going to hold it temporarily in place And I'm going to do the same thing front to back. So you can see, take this like that. And so the piece is attached like this. But the attachment is very weak, so the next step is to wrap tape around the ends of the tape that run vertically. And that's going to keep the head from falling off. From here, I'm going to wrap the joint where the head and the neck come together. I'm going to pull that tape really tightly. So that I have the head and neck joined well together. And you should be able to shake it. It shouldn't come apart. I should be able to hit the table with it. And it should stay on. If it doesn't, if it comes loose when you're rough with it, then you need to do a lot more taping. So from this point, we will be attaching it to the rock, and that will be our next step. After attaching the head to the neck, I looked at the profile and I noticed that it was a little flat. So I added a little bit of newspaper down here to build out the chin and the jawline, and a little bit on the forehead. I used the same technique that I used when I filled in this indentation on the back side of the neck. So I just wadded up a little piece of newspaper and placed it and then put tape across it and pulled the tape tightly to secure the newspaper very firmly to the surface. Okay. The next step that we're going to do is hot gluing this to the rock. Now I plugged this hot glue gun in about 10 minutes ago, and it is a high temperature hot glue gun, and I am using Gorilla Glue glue sticks. This stuff really sticks well. So before I start to glue, I'm going to kind of play around with where I want the head to sit on this rock. I might want to off-center it. I might want to go towards the back. Yeah, it's just kind of a matter of personal preference. So rotate the rock. I'm thinking possibly like that. I think I'm gonna go with that. So I'm gonna make sure the rock is dusted off pretty well. I took a wet paper towel to it earlier, so hopefully this hot glue will stick. I'm going to squeeze this hot glue all over the bottom. This stuff is really hot, so please make sure you keep your fingers away from it. I'm going to push it down onto the surface of the rock and really hold it tightly. This high temp hot glue, it takes a little bit to set up. So you're going to be like sitting here holding this thing for a few minutes. The low temp hot glue tends to set up really quickly because the temperature, the melting point is lower. It doesn't adhere as well. Things that are glued with low temp hot glue will break off a lot easier. The high temp hot glue really secures the two surfaces together very well. So this is still setting up, and while it's setting up, I can take a little bit of newspaper and I want to create a gradient from the neck down to the rock. And so I can kind of wrap this and push that into the hot glue. and wrap this around to start getting this kind of gradiated angle from the neck into the rock. Okay, well, take this together. Take a look at it. Add a little bit more. Hold that tight. I don't really want to tape it to the rock too much. A little bit of tape on the rock is okay, but you don't want tape coming out all over the edges of your rock. Push it in. So the tape is not going to hold the head to the rock at all. The hot glue is what's going to do that. And then when you add the paper clay is also going to help adhere this entire newspaper and masking tape form to the actual rock form. So I keep hitting it with tape so that I can kind of pull this in and firm up this surface. So now I have this, and you can see on this larger piece, the neck gradiates down into the rock, and that's what I'm kind of getting here. I will do that even more with the paper clay, which will be the next step. So hope to see you in a little bit for step 2. That will be in a separate video. Thank you for joining me on making the armature. So hopefully I will see you down the creative rabbit hole. Have a good day.